Welcome to the Rich, Young, and Powerful podcast. This is the place where we help average givers become everyday philanthropists. I'm your host, McNair, a financial commentator, author, nine-figure wealth manager, as well as a philanthropist too. I'm going to show you how to give more, how to find more fulfillment, and help you impact the causes that you care about most. Because when a giver gives more, they receive and become more. Today, I'm really excited about bringing on our special guest because I recently reread his book, His Needs, Her Needs, which is a fantastic marriage book. And it really helped facilitate a really good conversation with me and my spouse. It's a really overdue conversations. So I'm really excited about bringing on Bill Harley to help you and your spouse get on the same page about giving. So Bill, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Glad to be with you.
Well, for those who haven't had the luxury of reading one of your classics, like His Needs, Her Needs, what are the basic needs? If you don't mind sharing for the listeners that haven't actually read your book yet.
First of all, I have to give a caveat, have to say that the emotional needs of men and women in marriage fall into essentially 10 different categories. And not everybody has the same emotional needs, but what I've found is that the men tend to have needs different than what women have. Men's average emotional needs are sexual fulfillment, recreational companionship, physical attractiveness, domestic support, and admiration. For a woman, the top 5 emotional needs on average is affection, intimate conversation, honesty and openness, family commitment, and financial support. Now, again, I have to point out that we have a questionnaire we call the Emotional Needs Questionnaire, and without encouraging anybody to have any emotional needs different than what they actually have, I tell people, whatever your spouse tells you is their top emotional needs, that's what you have to believe. So it may not be the list that I've given for men and women. It's just my observation is that what men want in marriage is usually different than what women want. And that complicates the situation because it requires a certain amount of understanding of somebody that isn't at all like you and developing a skill set for something that you would not appreciate that much yourself. And so that's my counseling is basically educating men and women to understand each other's emotional needs, to become skilled in meeting those needs. And by doing that, they maintain their romantic love for each other.
You know, I'd love to hear your insight after counseling thousands of couples. What do you think are the success habits that you recommend and you've seen through fruitful and really just wonderful couples and their finances? I would love to hear those best practices with couples and their finances.
Well, we have a rule that I call the policy of joint agreement. And the policy of joint agreement is never do anything without an enthusiastic agreement between you and your spouse. And this is where negotiation begins in marriage. Whenever there is a conflict where one spouse wants to do something different than what the other spouse wants to do, you begin by saying, I'm not going to do anything until we're in agreement and until we're in enthusiastic agreement. And then I suggest 4 guidelines to make their negotiation successful. So if it's in the area of financial giving, you would apply. If it would be in any other conflict, it would also apply. It begins with the conversation should be pleasant and safe. Pleasant and safe. No demands, no disrespect, no anger. If you have any of that, you cut off the conversation, you don't talk about it anymore. The second guideline is that you try to understand the other person's position on the issue. In the case of financial giving, for example, why is this important to you? What do you think would benefit us if we were to do this? What's your history of giving, and have you experienced results? And you get that from each person's perspective. And my job as a husband would be to understand my wife, because I already understand myself. Coming up with a resolution that meets the policy of joint agreement, I only need to understand her to know what the possibilities might be. Then the third guideline is to let it incubate and think of all kinds of possibilities. Use your brain to imagine what the choices are, given what you've already learned about each other. And then the fourth guideline is to try using one of the things that you've come up with on a trial basis. In other words, you would say, both of us seem to be enthusiastic about this approach to giving, to our church, to other benefits, to other opportunities. This is what we think would work. So let's try it. And I use the concept of try it, you'll like it. This is not set in cement. We're not going to be doing this necessarily the rest of our lives. We're going to try it see if we like not only the idea of it, but the implementation of it. And then if it works out well, we'll just continue on that path until one of us feels that it's not working for them. That's essentially my approach to negotiation. I call it partnership. This is what partnership is in marriage. It's coming up with agreements that first of all take into account both of the spouses' positions on things and attitudes and reactions, and then following through with a trial to see if it works, see how you feel about it when you're doing it for a while. And then if it works, then you do it more permanently.
I love that, because, this trial of tithing and giving an additional offering above tithing, I think is one spouse who, is really, hesitant to give. And the other one is, if they can both be on board, they're both enthusiastic, as just saying, hey, let's try it. We don't know what the results, the fruit of it. I think after it becomes a habit, they will both potentially have a greater spiritual walk with the Lord, and it will become a permanent habit. And so I love that idea. Let's just try it. And I think that's some really good insight. I hope everyone was taking notes, because this is fantastic. Now, you also mentioned that partnership aspect, and I'd love to hear your opinion about this rise of double income households that have been on a steep incline for the last 30 years, and how that's created maybe a less need to stay together, because financially they think they can be independent, and they think the partners sadly can go in two different directions, that they're saying, hey, I don't need you financially, I'm self-sufficient. How do you think that has affected more affairs, affected divorce?
Well, I could talk on that subject for hours, but we'll try to cut it short. I basically got my PhD in 1967. It was a time in American history where marriages were in serious trouble. Prior to that time, in the 40s and 50s, divorce rates were very low. People valued marriage, and they basically had one-income families. Then in the 1960s, all of a sudden we became aware of the fact that women didn't have the same opportunities that men did. And so the feminist movement started to take charge, and women were encouraged to get the same jobs as men. I personally support that. I think that my wife, my daughter has a PhD in psychology. My granddaughter just got one, her daughter. So in our family, we have now 4 generations of psychologists. My dad and me, and then 2 women after that. So I'm a big supporter of women that are professional. But what it created in marriage was a very high divorce rate. And it took a while for men especially to adjust to a wife who was employed. I will say that it was also difficult for women as well. My role in helping couples adjust to dual careers has been to make sure that they don't neglect each other in the process. That here's a couple where the husband has a very good job, his wife has a very good job, and they have 2 children under the age of 5. That is a situation that I focus a great deal of my time and attention trying to help couples. And the thing that I try to encourage them to do that is possible and helps the marriage enormously is romantic dating. Now, it is something a lot of people don't think about. They think we've got too much going on here. It's all we can do to keep our heads above water. It's all we can do to make sure our kids have what they need. The idea of dating is something that it's a luxury we can't afford. My argument is it is an essential ingredient in a successful marriage, and I require 15 hours of dating each week. Now, that's a tough sell. It's a tough sell. I was basically a salesman by heart. I was selling all kinds of things before I had my PhD. Now what I'm doing is selling marriages. I'm selling good marriages. And to sell 15 hours a week of undivided attention where you're meeting each other's emotional needs, you're going out on dates on a regular basis when you have 2 careers and 2 children under the age of 5. How is it done? That's what I explained, how to do it. Now, the result is romantic love. The result is romantic love. And I will say this, no couple have ever come to me in my entire career saying we are in love with each other. We're crazy about each other, but we want to get a divorce. That has never happened, never will happen. If you're in love with your spouse and your spouse is in love with you, divorce should be the last thing in the world you would ever think about. And so my question is, what's the most powerful way to avoid divorce? And the answer is to remain in love throughout your entire married life. I personally am committed to marriage regardless of circumstances. I'm a believer in marriage commitment. However, most of the people I counsel are not. And I want to save their marriages. I want their marriages to prosper. And what I found is that I can do that by showing them how to be in love with each other. Commitment's important, but what I tell them is that their commitment should be to meet each other's emotional needs. So instead of talking about divorce or marriage as a commitment, we talk about the fact that what you need to do is meet each other's emotional needs. That should be your commitment. Because if you meet that commitment, you're never going to want to get a divorce.
I love it. That's so practical. Is going back to these emotional needs that we both have that are different. My emotional needs are different typically than my spouse's. And then also understand the priority of what their needs are. It's great to know those needs, but also to know the priority for each individual. It is, I think, so powerful. And then we customize our marriage to, again, show that overwhelming love, and romantic dating is one of those things where I could spend some quality time and intimate conversation, which my wife would love. But I also want to use myself as an example, actually getting married a little bit later in life than originally what was my plan is we were, I was a bachelor. I already had my finances. I had my bank accounts and Natasha had her bank accounts. When you see these couples that have, separate finances, what's your thoughts on spouses that are not keeping, not combining their finances, but keeping them completely separate at very far arm's distance. Do you think by combining bank accounts and shared finances, does that help prevent affairs?
I'm not sure that it prevents affairs. Well, ethically, I encourage that. I think that marriage, as I said earlier, is a partnership. It is a partnership of extraordinary care. And in marriage, what you have is not two people separate, you have two people together. And so the fact that they should join each other in the decisions would include joining each other in finance.
Right. We're joining not holy matrimony. Our finances should and merge together as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, I deal with a lot of people who, when they come to me, they're in the throes of a divorce. And what they've done is they put all their money together prior to this. It has not saved their marriage to do that.
Right.
And now we come into all kinds of problems with how to separate out the money that they have put together. In most cases, one person has a lot more money than the other in the joint account. I still maintain that putting the money together was a good idea. And in trying to save the marriage, I try to use the idea that they have a joint account as an example of how their whole life should be. Their whole life should be joined the way their account is. But I will say that it complicates divorce when the money is together. It makes divorce easier if the money is separated.
Yeah, and if that's what people have, and with that in mind, I have a divorce in mind when I get married. Yep, it would be easier to keep the finances separately. But imagine a company like Apple is Steve, kept his finances separately. Wozniak kept his finances separately. I mean, they would be partners, but you would be in a loose sense because they should have a unified mission. They should have a unified finances, and they should have unified interest as a team. And the same thing applies for, a couple. They should have, what is our mission statement as a couple? What do we want to be as a light and salt to the community around us and the couples that we intersect with? And how do we want to use that as an evangelism to the couples around us is how we live our lives. And then when it gets to our finances, is what's our goal with our finances? Is it to just provide for the needs of our family, provide for the needs of our kids, or are our finances supposed to be a glorification of the Lord? And what we've seen from statistics from Barna is that most of the time, glorifying God with our finances is like number 5 or 6 for many couples, and providing for their family, providing for well-being is way higher than actually using our finances, stewarding it for the gospel and being a part of our Christian testimony. I would also like to ask you, how would you help the foot in the mouth spouse like me who is convicted that he or she wants to increase the family's tithe past 10% or finally give that full 10%? And how would you, actually tangibly encourage that spouse to approach this discussion? What's the time of day? How do you approach this with your spouse? Because I think oftentimes people get it wrong. They do it at the end of, the day at 10:30 at night. They're going to start having conversations about money and hard decisions. And that may not be the best idea.
Yeah, I think that you have to understand that the best decisions in marriage take a while. It's a process. Now, Joyce and I, we on our radio show, we talk about the fact that we have a conflict just about every hour we're together. There is something that isn't quite right and needs to be solved. And we're experts at resolving conflicts in 30 seconds. And so we're really good at fast resolutions for things that could be somewhat troublesome at the moment. But then there are long-term problems. There are problems that have existed for a while where we have never really been able to figure out how are we going to do this in a way that's, and that requires a certain amount of I would say conscious and deliberate process. I think that when Joyce and I have a conflict, we're not thinking of the steps. We're not thinking of, okay, guideline 1, guideline 2, guideline. We're not thinking of those guidelines. We're just coming up with something. Yeah, that worked. So let's go for it. And then we're done. But when it comes to tithing, and when it comes to actually what I would consider to be all social giving, Joyce and I give of our time a great deal for other people. And even that has to be agreed upon in advance. I cannot just decide that somebody else needs my time, and I do it without talking to Joyce first.
Because you're not your own anymore. I mean, when you're one flesh, deciding, hey, we're going to start giving 12% of our gross income, or, we're going to start volunteering and getting more involved. I think that absolutely, when you're one flesh, it should be a very big discussion where both of you are enthusiastically on board about that, because you can't just, let me volunteer for you. And that's not going to work.
Yeah. And I think that works for both time and money. That basically your time is a joint, it is owned. My time is owned by Joyce. Her time is owned by me. My money is owned by Joyce. Joyce's money is owned by me. We don't worry a whole lot about whose name things are in, because we understand that that it turns out to be something we both have. Years ago, I used to invest in real estate, and in California, the law was that I could buy and sell houses without putting my wife's name on it. Now, we understood that everything I had was hers, everything she had was mine. I didn't worry about it. I came to Minnesota. Turns out I can't do that. Turns out if I buy a house, and there I was at closing, and they say, well, do you have your wife's signature? Well, no, I didn't think I needed it. So I got my wife down real quick to the closing. But I like how they do things in Minnesota. I like that they require, even though her name is not on the deed, she's required to sign off on it. I like that. I think that's the way it should be in law and in daily practice. So Joyce and I, our schedules are made together. And to some extent, I think time is more important than money. Time is more valuable than money. What you do with your money is very important, but what you do with your time is very, very important. And so Joyce and I have to bargain with our time together, our time spent for the benefit of other people, as well as the money that is spent for the benefit of other people.
Absolutely. I love that people think that dependence is a bad thing. It's not inside the marriage to be dependent upon one another. And I think that's how a team and a partnership really does excel and really does have kingdom impact, when they're actually dependent upon each other, because they are both dependent on the Lord to keep the unity together. I love talking about this because I dealt with in my career a lot of retirees that not only give throughout their lifetime, but they come to estate planning and legacy gifts that they want to give to churches and ministries. And I think it's an amazing way to give. But this is a topic that sometimes can, really have impacts for the widow that is left behind. And I wanted to hear if you've ever been a part of any of these legacy estate planning conversations and how you think it's best approached, because these are very impactful decisions that will impact even their kids' inheritances when they choose to give 25 or 50% of their legacy, their estate, to charity. So how should a spouse maybe approach that as well?
Well, I think it's very, very important. My experience in counseling is mostly with younger couples. They're not thinking too much about their estate planning. I mean, 401k is as far as they go.
Sure.
But the idea that what are you going to do with the money that's left over after you're gone? My argument is that it's a very important thing. I know that everybody in our family has put our money into trusts for that purpose. I mean, well, we all have basically our wills all made up. Who gets what goes to charity, what doesn't. But I basically will argue that in our culture today, my impression is that a smaller and smaller percentage of people are leaving anything to anybody. That's been my impression. My impression is that we're headed toward a culture where we spend our money right up to the very end, and that's, I don't know how I see in your world, you may be dealing with people who are highly motivated to leave a legacy. In my world, it's more of a hand to mouth world.
Sure.
And at the end of their life, they don't have much left over for anybody.
Which is one way to live, right? And I really would love to talk about how me and my spouse approached it. We have worked really hard, and the Lord's really blessed the labor that I did before the marriage and through the marriage. And we sat down and we talked about, what are some organizations, some charities that we feel very strongly about, such as Samaritan's Purse and the International Mission Board and Word of Life Ministries. And we sat down and we said, these are some organizations, among others, that we feel so strongly about. And there's many that can probably relate that there's a good chance that we may not spend down everything that we have saved up. And so we've decided to give half of our estate to charity upon my passing, and half of that goes to her, and then half of that after her passing goes to the family. And these are very important discussions that I think that a spouse should go into very prayerfully, listening to the other party very closely, and also bringing in an estate planning attorney. And that's why, in my office, we have an estate planning attorney exclusively for our clients. And it's really handy to have someone like that, because they can mediate these kind of conversations that would be tough otherwise if it was just us two. And it's really important to even have the family involved as well at that point, because you don't want to catch the kids off guard. That would just be a negative legacy, is to just surprise your kids and your nieces and your nephews. They should see your charitable walk with the Lord, but they also should see that you have already decided that you're going to give a large percentage of your net worth away at the time of your passing. And that shouldn't be a surprise to the kids. And that is my strong opinion and belief. And I've seen that work really well. Kids that have done well have no problem with their parents giving their money away. They understand that there's people that have a greater need than they do. The kids that probably are going to potentially struggle financially, they're thinking about themselves, they're thinking selfishly. There's no amount of money in the world, not even the Vanderbilts could leave enough money to probably, fill that black hole that child may have of selfishness. And so I think at the end of the day, you have to come back to, hey, we've worked really hard for this, and the Lord's blessed us. What do we want to do with this, and what kind of kingdom impact are we going to make with our finances?
If you've earned money from somebody, it means you've done somebody some good.
Absolutely.
And people who basically inherit their money are inheriting what somebody else has done that's good.
And who can ever, understand the grind, the work ethic that took to make that, they can never truly appreciate it. And it's not their fault, because it was like the first time I was given a car. And I was given a truck, and I found every ditch possible to drive that truck into. Why? Because if I didn't work for it, I had a great time in it. I basically destroying the thing, but because I didn't work for it. But when I bought my own Camry, I took good care of that. I was oiling the seats and everything. So I think those are some tough conversations, but I love if the spouses can get enthusiastic on the same page and they both feel strongly about that. I mean,
What year was your Camry?
oh, that was a 1996. And then I had a 2000.
I have a 1997 Camry.
Of course. Those things never go and they never die.
And it runs great.
Of course. And it's that that frugality that builds estates. And so I think that's the legacy you want to pass on to your kids is the education and passing on what you've learned along the way. I think that's what to be shared. So let's see. I want to ask some of these really important questions to me because I'd love to hear your insight. Is if you could write one tweet that would be read by everyone in the world, every couple's going to read this tweet, what would it say?
Okay, let me read it to you because I prepared this ahead of time.
Great.
So let me bring it over. It is, marriage is a relationship of mutual extraordinary care. There are three different expressions of that care. Emotional care, which is being each other's greatest source of happiness. Protection involves avoiding hurting each other. And partnership is making decisions that benefit both of you. That is a lead paragraph in the newest version of His Needs, Her Needs. And the basic idea is to emphasize the fact that when you marry with what the scriptures call goodwill. When upon Christ's birth, the angel said, peace on earth, goodwill toward men. Goodwill is something in marriage that is so important that I want my wife to be successful. I want her to be happy. I want to be the contributing factor in making her a happier and better person. And she feels the same way about me. And so that's what marriage is. And that would be something I would communicate. Now, something else that I might add is that if I had one thing to tell the world, and one thing only, I'm putting this in the marriage context, but if I had one thing to tell the world, I would say, Jesus Christ is Lord. And if you don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ, you have missed the boat in a gigantic way.
Absolutely. I mean, and if you think about it, it shouldn't be a surprise when divorces happen. Otherwise, when that whole worldview of I don't have anyone to answer to but to my spouse, who I'm already independent of financially, I'm independent emotionally of, I'm not dependent upon, and I have no other God to answer to other than the God of myself. That's a scary road and a scary path to go down. And so who's to say if you don't have Jesus Christ as your Lord, who's to say that divorce is wrong and you're not just out to get whatever's best for you? And that's the different worldviews. So I love that. I think that is the tweet that the world needs to see.
Yes, exactly. It's the most important thing in life. If I don't get through life without a relationship with the Lord through Jesus Christ, my whole life is worthless. It has been of no value whatsoever.
Absolutely. I also would like to ask you, do you have a strong belief that really isn't shared by popular culture?
I would say most of my strong beliefs. I would say I'm really the odd man out in a lot of different ways. I've been canceled. I've actually been canceled by Google. So you can see that I've got to be doing something right.
Absolutely.
But no, I think that my basic belief that marriage should be a partnership. I'm very much opposed to independent behavior. that goes against cultural norms. I'm very much in favor of heterosexual marriage. That goes against cultural norms. I am a strong believer in Jesus Christ. I think that goes against cultural norms these days. I think we're in a world right now where we are not to judge other people, regardless of what they do. Jesus himself in the book of John is the great judge. Interestingly enough, it's not God the Father that's the judge. It's Jesus himself that is the judge. And the point is that there is right and wrong in the world. And God has pointed us to his values of right and wrong. And if we don't pay attention to those values, if we say they don't exist, they don't exist. That this is something that each person has their own, make up their own mind about what's right and wrong. They don't understand what universal truth is all about. And they are sadly mistaken.
Well, I think we're already seeing some of the pendulum swing so far hard that it's breaking the glass, because when there is no truth, there is a breakdown of society. We've seen statistically, when there is not a nuclear family and a child does not have a father or a mother that is there for them, that child is more likely to end up in prison. They're more likely not to succeed throughout life. And that's because God already built what a family looks like and what a marriage looks like. Even before the fall, we know what marriage looks like. And it predates sin, and marriage is after sin. And if we don't go back to say that's what marriage is, and Jesus was very clear. When he talked about divorce, he pointed back to marriage in Genesis, that this is the example. And so culture, again, and what's sad is culture is being run by people that are in their 30s and 40s who have only been on this planet for 30 years, that think that they've got it figured out. And that's pretty scary, because they've only been here for 30 years. And Jesus points back to marriage, the institution that's been around for thousands of years. So, yes, those are unpopular beliefs, but they're great beliefs. I would also like to ask you, so what are some misconceptions that maybe people have about you that you would like to straighten the record on? What would this common misconceptions about you or your teachings that you would like to clear up?
The biggest misconception is that I'm trying to tell people what their emotional needs are. And that I'm telling men that their emotional needs are this and this and this. And I'm telling women that their emotional needs are this and this. That's the farthest thing from the truth. I'm telling a couple, you figure out what your own emotional needs are. It's my understanding that they will be different. And because they're different, you will struggle with coming to an understanding of each other. That's it. Okay. Another misconception is that I am telling women that they have to have sex with their husbands. And there's been a book just recently written where the author of the book, Christian, has put me on the list of books not to read. Instant Eternities, you should not read that, because he is telling women that they have to have sex with their husband. Farthest from the truth. I am saying that sex is a gift for both women and men. It's a gift.
Sure. And Paul talked about this. He said, don't withhold what you have, because your body's not your own anymore. So again, that's one of those agreements and things and counseling that people may need to work through, but they most should be enthusiastically on the same page.
Exactly. And so I'm not telling people that they have to do this under any circumstances. I'm saying that they need to figure out a way of making it an enjoyable experience, what God had intended in the first place. And so I was very, I wrote back to the author, look, read my book, read it. You'll see that I haven't said that, you know,
Sure.
but, you know, I pay a lot of attention to criticism. I really do. And I'm listening to, people write me and you know, we have a regular show and it's mostly about misunderstandings of what I've actually written. And every once in a while, a comment will come up on for his needs, her needs, where somebody will write saying such and such. And right away, there will be a comment immediately after that by somebody else saying, you haven't read his book. And that to me is my greatest defense. Read the book before you criticize.
Read the book before you criticize. Absolutely. Just don't read the cover, read the actual book.
Right.
And I'm going to give credit, and maybe it's the wrong credit, but I believe it was Stephen Covey that tells the story of the person that says, you know, I want to divorce my spouse. And he says, well, tell me more. And he says, well, I want to divorce my spouse. And he says, I just don't think there's anything I can do. And he says, what would you do? He said, well, I would love her. And he says, no, but you understand, you know, I don't think she's lovable. I don't think I can love her. And he says, no, love her. And if he, like you said from the get-go, if we went back to spending 15 hours with our spouse, romantic dating, a lot of those things would fall right back into place like they're supposed to. If we went back to doing what we first did when we did fall in love in the beginning. And I think we all need that reminder. And so if that's the only reminder you get from the show today is go back to doing what you first did, go back to loving your spouse like you once did. And a lot of those things will fall right back into place. And putting their needs above your own and knowing what those needs are and knowing the order of those by actually being interested in your spouse would be a good first step.
Joyce and I have been married 60 years, and we are still doing what we did while we were dating. Before we were married, we go out, we have fun, we enjoy each other's company more than we would enjoy being with anyone else, and we make it turn out that way. It's a deliberate effort on our part to demonstrate our care for each other. When people see Joyce and I in public, they know we're in love. Our body language demonstrates that.
I mean, that's salt and light, and every marriage should be that. And everyone, and you've seen that in society. People say, well, I will just live together for, you know, a decade, and then maybe we'll think about getting married. And what a shame that, you know, as someone that's married, I have a responsibility to show how beautiful marriage is and tell people, what are you waiting on? This is fantastic. You need to get married immediately because you're missing out. It's that much better when you get married. And there's the sex is better in marriage. Managing finances together is better in marriage. Testimony to God, our whole marriage is that testimony. It's so much better married. And so I really appreciate you coming on the show, but I want to ask you, where can people find you over the next few months? Any upcoming releases? Please share with us your show so people can find you easier.
Well, first of all, we do a radio show every day, Marriage Builders Radio. You can get our app, listen to our show on your app, or go directly to our website, marriagebuilders.com. Joyce and I field questions from all over the world. At my age, I'm not doing as many seminars as I used to, but I still do 2 or 3 a year. I don't have any coming up immediately. I've been invited a few places I haven't yet decided. The best place to see me is on podcasts like you. And I'm on a lot of YouTube. You can see me on television, and my parts of my seminar are available on YouTube. But marriagebuilders.com is where you get to see what I've written. And I started in 1995. That's when Marriage Builders first saw the internet. And we've been going strong ever since.
Well, Bill, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. I know many married and about to be married couples will really enjoy this, and I hope it's a guide for them. And I hope they check out your classic. His and Her Needs is a beautiful book. beautiful book, and you should read it for yourself. That's all we got for this episode of Rich, Young, and Powerful Podcast. One thing that would really help us both is to go on to your iTunes, to go on to Spotify, to go on to your podcast platform that you listen to this and give the show a review. Also, be sure to check out our book, The Giving Crisis, by clicking on richyoungandpowerful.com. You can order a copy of that book right now. So be sure to pick a copy of that up. And also check out our YouTube channel, The Everyday Philanthropist, where we talk about how to tithe and give more. So again, until next time, remember that when a giver gives more, they receive and become more.